Hi, and welcome to The Other Side of Sales. I'm Sunanda Nair.
And I'm Ashleigh Early.
Today, we're speaking with Nirvanna Lildharrie. She's a senior enterprise account executive with RippleMatch, and she has nearly 7 years experience as a full cycle account executive, both in SaaS and advertising, primarily working in Boston. In her free time, you can find her painting or studying yoga as part of her teacher training. Nirvanna, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sunanda.
I was just thinking, Nirvanna, last night that we've known each other for a long time, but I couldn't pinpoint how. So I think you remember better than I do.
Mm-hmm. So I was actually one of those Women in Sales Everywhere events in Boston. And I remember going there being really excited to meet other women who were working as account executives. And surprisingly, there weren't many. Like when I finally met people and learned about their role, it was like they were sales enablement or more of like the Salesforce role or a sales recruiter. And so it's like there's got to be more account executives that are women in Boston. So I literally went on LinkedIn and did a search of account executives and added everyone with like a feminine sounding name or who looked like a woman, using my bias. And then when I added you, you actually reached out to me and asked how you could help. And that just started a really good networking relationship.
That's awesome. I'm glad that it happened that way. I'm not going to have to go through my LinkedIn messages and find this from years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you reached out, because I remember that I do remember us like starting to talk and me being like, just from my background, like, oh, there's other Indian women in sales or women with Indian backgrounds in sales. So it was rare. I think that's
Yeah, definitely. I would love to see more of us.
I love the idea of just like being like, there has to be more women in sales. I'm going to go find them. Like just this idea of like, I'm going to use my sales skills and stalk people until they pay attention to me. But I feel like that's how all of these groups kind of started. I mean, I feel like a lot of us have gone through that point of just kind of almost like rage connecting with people. Like, I cannot be the only one. Where are you? And then like just like scouring LinkedIn, because I did the same thing in San Jose. Like where I was like, okay, like I love the women in my office and they're great, but like we can't be the only ones. We just can't. And so it just, yeah, we did a lot of the same thing, just randomly reaching out to people and being like, hi. Like, I mean, even something I've told a few people this, like even something as simple as like talking to someone and like being like, hey, no motive, just trying to connect with more women who do this. And can we please be friends? Like just being as like hyper direct. And since I've moved to the Netherlands, I can now blame everything on being Dutch. Just go full Dutch, just be hyper direct. But it works. I mean, these relationships, these connections, they don't build themselves. And these events are a lot. I've heard really good things about women in sales. There are a ton of women in sales groups, but we also want to be inclusive to like everyone in revenue. So it's great that there's a lot of enablement and ops and all these other things and SDRs. I noticed this for me. I don't know if this holds true for the both of you, but like I had a lot more dedicated, intentional networking when I was an SDR, because I was like, I've got to meet people because I don't know what I'm doing. But as I got further and further in my career, I go to these events and they seem to be more generally populated by people who are in their first couple of years. And then that means that it's harder to like just show up to an event and be able to make connections with people the way I did when I was an SDR. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
Well, personally, I feel like I'm very much a networker, so I do try to go to those events as much as possible. I really like the in-person events. I think the drop off for me has been in-person to virtual and just not having the energy to do yet another Zoom call when I'm on Zoom calls all day long. I don't know. What do you think, Sunanda?
Yeah. No, I think as I progressed through my career, I would still go, but I noticed that, I think to Ashley's point, I would see people like who are like first, second year in their careers. And then everyone else who was sort of more senior was on the panel or like, and so it's not that I was intimidated, because I'm one of those people that's not intimidated to go up and talk to someone, but preface that with like a lot of people are. And so it already seemed like there's a barrier, like, do you want to go and talk to this person who's senior who just, took their evening off to do a panel? Like I saw that interesting. I saw that shift as I kept going, as I got older. And then to Ashley's point, I feel like I got too busy, and that's not a good excuse, because now I'm like trying to figure it back, like make it more of a priority again. But I do wonder if that happens, particularly to women, right, in sales who, end up taking on more as they, do things like start families or stuff like that. And it's, and a lot of that burden falls on them. So it's interesting that, and then the virtual thing has sort of like thrown me off completely. So
it's interesting how the in-person and the virtual hit differently too.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. And it's different person to person, I found too. Cause like it's pretty easy for me to do more Zooms. It's not a huge deal, but for me to go to an in-person event, despite the fact that I'm definitely an extrovert. My husband described me as gregarious the other day. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably fair. But like the actual act, it's not the networking event or being social that is draining to me, but leaving my house and going there has always just felt like such a big thing. Like I'm definitely someone who I don't have the excuse of having a family and kids. I have the dogs, but even I remember as an SDR, like if I was going to take an evening and go to a networking event, like that just always felt like a huge lift for me. So I'm like, the whole point of working is so I can go live my life, which doesn't involve work. So why am I giving an extra 3 to 5 hours to work and work related things? And it's always that's always been something that people were super confused by. Like, well, why wouldn't you go to like 3 networking events a week? I'm like, because I have a husband and a life and I'd like to go live it.
Yeah. And also like, I just want to shut my brain off sometimes
Yes.
after a full day of sales.
I think it was easier. Yeah. When we were in the office and then it's like you go for an hour or two after the office, you can bring some of your coworkers with you. And I mean, like in sales too, it's like, hey, let's go sell this. Like, let's go meet people. Let's see who they can introduce us to. So it's fun when it's a group activity. But yeah, if you're going by yourself, the motivation is like, oh, yeah.
It's hard. This is why I love like just the LinkedIn stalking. That's what I found is like my network building has shifted from I'm going to go to events to because that's just a lift for me to I'm just going to start telling people on LinkedIn I think they're cool and can we do a call and connect.
Yeah.
And like just those little things make a huge difference and it results in multi-year things. I mean, I've got 5 or 6 people that same thing. It started off a LinkedIn connection in 2015, 2016. Honestly, the best example of that I've got is I feel like I'm slightly name dropping here. Actually, no, I'm is Morgan Ingram. Like Morgan Ingram and I randomly connected on LinkedIn and I was just like, hey, SDR Chronicles is freaking awesome. I love it. And then he was like, oh, really? Would you like to be on it? And I was like, oh my God, I get to be on this thing. And now he's like a pretty good friend.
Yep.
Like I'm not trying to flex, but like, that's the point. This has been like almost 4 years, almost 5 years. I think at this point that was 2016. So it's been 5 years.
That's awesome.
Going through this stuff and being like, hey, could you amplify this? Can you amplify that? But also just like, connecting on what's working right now. And those are huge, huge, huge things. Like you can have meaningful career building relationships off of random LinkedIn connections. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And I think actually part of what drove me to do that is because I've been working in sales in Boston and like the Boston sales scene, I don't know if it's across every industry, but at least in advertising and tech is very male dominant. There have been times when I've been the only woman on my team, the youngest, the only woman of color, so it's just like, it's been a lot of being the only. On teams in Boston. So that kind of drove me to do that. And for a while, like I think because my name's Nirvana, I'm always like, I need to do something really big with my life. So for a while I was like, okay, I want to be the first Indian woman CRO. And then I was watching a panel on like Zoom and saw Deanie Mehta, who is the CRO at Lattice. And so I literally just added her on LinkedIn and now she knows who I am because I've direct messaged her and I'm like, hey, I thought I was going to be the first Indian woman CRO, but here you are posting every single day and I love everything you're saying and I'm going to follow you. And so, like now she at least knows me on a first name basis, but we're not like best friends or anything.
That speaks to the domino effect because you're the one who told me about her. And I was like, I connected her and wrote her a little note and she wrote back and I was just like, now like I see her posts and I'm like, this is super inspiring.
Yeah.
But
This
I
is the
probably,
value of representation. If you see it,
Mhm.
this is why it's so important. Sorry, I'm like I hear these.
yeah.
Yeah, this is why we do this stuff.
I know, but I remember, were we on a Zoom? We were just on like a personal
I
one
think it was, yeah, I threw her name in to be part of this podcast. I was like, you need to talk to this lady. Yeah.
Yeah, and I looked her up and I was like, how have I not heard of her?
Mhm.
And it was just like one of those moments where like, this is why I love like my network and like why I won't, like when I got your message, like I don't remember exactly when, but I try to be, I want to be as open as possible. Like if I get to them, because I want to meet people, like I want to meet
Yeah.
people like you who, know you have your own network and I want to plug into that, right? And
Yeah.
that's all. But I knew Nirvana, we've talked a lot, and I actually interviewed at the place she was at, and it was funny because we were having a lot of early conversations about career progression. But I don't know, you've been in AE for 7 years now, I believe. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think I also had a trajectory of like, okay, I really like what I'm doing, but what's the next step? And so I'm curious, like how have you been, over the past 7 years, how's that looked like for you? And, where would you want to like it go there?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so like another interesting thing is when I got into sales, I didn't know I was interviewing for a sales job initially because what is an account executive? I just knew what the company did because I had an internship in advertising. So I kind of like went for the account executive role with this company that I knew what they did. It was Criteo. And I reached out to their director of sales, who also happened to be an alum from my alma mater. That's how I got my first sales job as an account executive. So I've never actually taken the SDR track. And I think when I was first an account executive, I was really like evaluating, like, do I want to be in sales? Like I'm here now. Do I like this? And my first year in sales was really hard. Like I had a tough time figuring out how to plan ahead with my pipeline. So like while I was ramping, I was killing it. And then like had a harder time when I was fully ramped. And I was like, I don't know how to plan for the quarter ahead when I have like this quarter to think about. So it was really hard. But then when I moved into my second company, I think that's when I really started to develop a love for sales. And I was at that next company for like nearly 3 years. It didn't occur to me that I could be a manager at that point, but I was doing other leadership things outside of work. So I had started a band with a bunch of other women that I met on Craigslist. So not only networking on LinkedIn, also networking on Craigslist. And I'm going to be in one of their weddings now. We're all still very close, but I was the leader of the band. Essentially, I was like arranging music directing, also trying to create camaraderie within the team, and like motivating people, like it was really like that's where my leadership skills shined. And then when I moved into SaaS with my next company, which was Robin, the company that you interviewed with, that's where I really started thinking like, okay, maybe I do want to be a manager. And in fact, during my interview, they were like, hey, we have this career progression track here. So like transitioning into SaaS, I actually took like a title and a pay dip to get into SaaS, because there were also some SaaS companies that were like, hey, you work in advertising, we're not going to hire you because you work with a different payment model. And that was frustrating. And Robin was willing to take me. And they were like, yeah, but there is this career progression where you could be leading a team by next year. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. And that's kind of when I started thinking about like, yeah, I do want to be a manager. Because like, I mean, from my perspective, it just made a better use of my skill set, right? And I started having those conversations like not early on, because I was like still trying to like make a name for myself at that company. And then it's like the timing of when you ask to be a manager, I just like didn't understand how to do that. I was like 25 years old at the time too. And so like I'm here at this company. I did eventually get promoted into another individual contributor role, but before that, they did promote this other guy that was like the best performer on the team, but didn't have those leadership skills, right? So I was like really frustrated with that, because I'm like, okay, yeah, he's a really great sales rep, but I could probably do a better job. And I hated that I had that attitude, but like that's how I felt. I was really like crabby about it. And like after that experience, that's when I really started asking. But like the timing was just like off with my last company, and some other things happened that led me to leave. So now I'm at this totally new company also. And like I asked like during my interview and on day one, and like we had a new director start and I asked to. So I'm like, hey, I want to be promoted. My goal is to be a manager. So now I'm being a lot more aggressive about it and advocating for myself. But like historically, it's kind of been like I don't know if I'm allowed to ask for this, you know? So
I got to ask two things here. One is just because I happen to know people who are literally dealing with this right now. They're going through that
yeah,
process. Do I want to be a manager? So
yeah.
how, like, what was that process for you? Like deciding between like, okay, like I want this track and here's how I know I want this track versus I want this track because this is what you do. Because kind of in theory, like the trajectory, when most people imagine a career trajectory in sales, it's, IC, managing ICs, managing managers, VP of sales.
Yeah.
But in reality, 90% of people in sales will never be a VP of sales and probably shouldn't be a VP of sales because, one, the top rep at the company typically makes more money.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So just keeping that in mind, like if your goal is to make as much money as possible, you do not want to be the VP of sales. You want to be the top sales rep. Kind of going through all those sort of mechanizations around, okay, so what does that look like? So there's tons of different roads. Just we all focus on VP of sales because I don't know why, we just do.
Yeah.
But so I'm talking with a few women right now around like, okay, so why do you think you want to be in leadership? Is it because that's the track we all talk about, or is it because that's what you actually want? So how did you go through the process of like, yes, this is what I want to do, and here's why, and here's how I know and here's how I've prepared to be successful, other than running a band, which is just the freaking coolest thing I've ever heard.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think, what's interesting is like I kind of like I just said, I feel like the reason I want to be a manager is because it's the best use case for my skill set. And when I started telling people I wanted to be a manager, they told me what my motivation should be. So they were like, hey, I'm a manager right now. And when we're interviewing for managers, we like to hear that managers say that they are invested in their team success more than their own success. And that's why you should want to be a manager. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I think like if that's my goal, obviously, like I'm going to be invested in that. And I do love people and like empathize with people, and I'm good at relationship building and like growing people's skills. When I see something good in someone, I like to help them see it too and grow that. But I think like the real motivation is one, like I said, like I want to be a leader. And more than just like a manager and like managing other people, moving into those VP of sales, like director, VP, CRO type positions where I'm thinking more strategically about a business, because that's just like I think what I'm best at, and I'm being underutilized right now in an individual contributor role is how I feel. I think another piece of it is something that I noticed with my dad, who also is in sales, is he's in his 50s. He's going to hate me for throwing him under the bus there with his age. But he's been an individual contributor his whole career. And recently, when he was in a job search, it was really hard for him to move into a management position, but also get hired into an individual contributor role because of his age. And there is some ageism in the industry as well. Like nobody wants to hire a 50-year-old AE to work among like a bunch of 20 to 30-year-olds, you know? So I think that like also career-wise, it's a more strategic move. And like, that's just like what it is.
I think you touched on something like, and I agree with you, like matching the skill set. And I think when I finally made the leap to move to management, it was like built on my network, right? Like people who saw what I could do. And I think, after talking to you and building relationships with you and several other women who, one ended up going to Robin too, who worked with me, which was funny, is I noticed that when I was like the only woman in the room, and like slowly I started becoming like, there was other women now, like, oh, I remember the moment I was on a team where there were two other women, and I was like, this is mind blowing. Like, and I think it like management matches my skill set, but also a lot of my motivation is, we talk, right? And I hear some of your frustration, and like I talk to other people in my network, and I see so many women of color, like underrepresented, folks in the SDR role or very early AU role, and they just drop off. They go into like, not that there's anything wrong with it, but they go into like, a marketing role or an enablement role, but they really like sales. And I'm like, what's happening here? Right.
Yeah.
And part of me was like, I want a seat at that table. One, I know I can do it, that I know I can do the job, and I've been doing it sort of without the title. And two, like, I want to be at the table to be like, how are these decisions getting made where we're losing so much talent?
Yes.
And I don't know why. Like, they want to be in sales, but they don't see the path. And like, that's hugely frustrating to me. I'm like, that person would be a great manager, and they're like touching their number. What is going on? Like, why is and I'm just using an example, but I've actually seen this. Why is the white guy who's been in sales for a year, just handed the position because he's been there, longest? And it's like, it's just, mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned that. So like I just this year through my work at RippleMatch, which is a diversity recruitment tool that I'm currently selling, I had been diving deeper into D&I and that whole industry and like all the research around there. And there was a report from McKinsey, but also the Lean In org about the broken rung. And this was the first time that I've ever heard about that this year, where what's happening with the drop off in women in leadership in sales, or I think it's across all industries, actually, in case of the broken rung for their women in the workplace study, is that it's not actually like so much a glass ceiling as much as it is a broken rung at the beginning of their career, where like they're early on in a woman's career, like when she's entry level or an individual contributor, there's this missed promotion to bring her into leadership that can affect or slow down her promotion progress throughout her entire career. And it leads to what we're seeing right now, which is like a bunch of men, especially white men in leadership, and women having a harder time catching up, which I thought was really interesting to learn. And I definitely feel like I want to hold myself accountable for my whole career. Like that's just my attitude. And I think also in the Lean In book, they talk about how women tend to blame internal factors rather than external factors for things that go wrong. But also it caused me to ponder a little further about my own career and like how work culture led me to have shorter tenures than I would have wanted at most companies I worked with, to basically make it harder for me to get promoted. And also, I mean, I think that work culture also affects, like you said, like those SDR women who decide to take an alternate track than sales when they clearly have sales DNA. So I have some anecdotes there, but want to pause here for your feedback.
No, I love this idea because you guys introduced me to this on the pre-call very briefly, and immediately my brain ran to a dozen women I know who literally, I compared it to thinking of a river, and there's this thing you can get in rivers called eddies,
Yeah.
which are basically like places where the current just spins you in a circle pretty much forever rather than moving you downstream. And I don't know why. Well, no, I know why it's misogyny, and culture and all these other things, which is kind of why I do this podcast. But to try and change these things. But I know dozens of women at this point who are brilliant and who are trying and who are pushing and who have done everything right.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes them 10 years to get a leadership role. It takes them, it takes 5 years to get caught in this catch-22 of, oh, we want someone for leadership who's got leadership experience, and we're going to hire someone externally. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, well, now, okay, well, you're applying for a role at another company. Oh, well, why didn't you get promoted to manager at your current company? Because they want someone with external leadership experience. But now I'm going external and I can't get a job because I don't have leadership experience. Yep. And at the same time, I can think of a dozen men who have become VPs of sales within 5 years running 10, 15, 20, 30 person teams. I don't know many women, if any, where that's happened to. And we addressed this on a very early episode of Other Side of Sales. It was called Is a Meteoric Rise for Men Only? And the general consensus we got out of that is no, but predominantly yes. And that's infuriating. Like that just pisses me off that it's something so seemingly simple and yet inherently complex. Like I get it. We've all read that study that says that they did I think it might've been McKinsey, it might've been Harvard Business Review, I forget. but there's a study that was done. They did a survey of a bunch of like a couple thousand hiring managers, not just in sales, all businesses. And they found that when men were selected for a promotion, the words that were used to describe why they got it were potential, you know, all the words kind of like that. When women were promoted, it was experience. So we're constantly getting caught in this thing. And sales is great because there is a lot of sales that is a pure meritocracy. You come in, you hit quota. Great. But there are a lot of external factors that can impact your ability to hit quota that have nothing to do with your ability. Stuff like the presence in your patch, how your patch reacts to you as an individual. I know a lot of women of color who are selling into the deep South, and in certain industries, that is a hard road to walk. You're literally going to be walking it because you can control your internal culture in sales. You cannot control the culture of your clients. So I know a lot of women who've from the sales census last year and stuff, who shared stories about trying to sell into in transited industries and literally facing sexism and racism in areas of the US, at least, that still deal with these things heavily.
And I think
it's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why, like, you know, the sales census, I think, is super important. And, you know, Nirvana, part of the reason I wanted, you know, to bring you, to introduce you is like, we see, like, everyone I talk to has these stories, but like, then you go to like people who are in like the upper rungs of leadership, and they're like, well, there's just not candidates for like director, VP roles. And I'm like, but that's where to your point, the broken run comes in. It's like, well, yeah, there are no candidates because no one is actually like, this pipeline is not being nurtured at all. There's
Totally.
plenty of women SDRs that I know. There's plenty of underrepresented people in SDR world. What is happening there? Like, let's not just shelve it, but just like put the top rung on hold for a second, right? What's happening down here where you don't feel like you have anyone who has the experience?
Oh, and there's another point where this rung gets broken too a lot in sales specifically, and that's in SDR leadership. A ton of women, myself included, went into SDR leadership, and SDR leadership is not viewed as equivalent to AE leadership. So it's really hard to get out of that track. And so like,
it's
okay,
easier to get that role. Sorry, Sunanda.
No, it is. I'm in that role right now, and it was so hard for me to break in, and I love it, right? And I, you know, the person who helped, you know, bring me on, who I worked with before, has been in sales and in SDR management. But I noticed that too, right? Like, I'm working, you know, and I notice in other orgs, like, oh, we have women in sales, but they mean the SDR org, which is totally fine. And then you go to the sales side with the, you know, the AEs, all of leadership,
all men. Totally. And I think like with this SDR manager role, you're also managing people who are younger than you. So it's like a different dynamic, and it's like, oh, we can trust a woman to do this, but can we trust a woman to be our cash register, you know? And it's like, yes, you can. Like, just try it.
Well, forget. I mean, just the very fact that that's a question that is asked consciously or unconsciously. And I think a lot of it's unconscious. I think
it is.
I honestly believe from the bottom of my heart that 99% of leaders are really trying to do the right thing and get the best talent possible, because hopefully, I think, because they think it's the right thing to do, and B, because I think they're smart enough to know it's good business. The better your talent, the more money you make, period. And to get the best talent, you have to make sure that you're getting the widest pool possible. But just the very idea like that this stuff comes up, it's like, we can't fix these ideas until we call them out and we have honest discussions. And there's this interesting idea I've been reading more about as I'm doing my own education on DEI. And it's this, I've always felt a little uncomfortable in some ways talking about some of these things. And I'm hesitant to call out certain things aggressively because I don't really care what people think of me, but I don't want to dip into triggering confirmation bias, which is basically where, like, if you try and challenge someone too hard, it just reinforces their position. We see this in politics all the time. So I want to like get people to think differently, not be like, no, you're wrong, stop doing this. Unless it really is wrong, in which case I will tell you this is stupid, don't do it. But I've had a few people call me, and I've read more articles talking about the importance of everyone needs to be having these conversations around the broken rung, around unconscious biases, around microaggressions, around actual healthy hiring practices, because you never know who the other person needs to hear it from. So white men need to have these conversations because there are going to be white men who will only hear it from white men who are similar in age to them. There are going to be,
Yes.
but there are going to be women who need to hear from other women. There are going to be people from every different, like everyone needs to be talking about this, because you never know who needs to hear it from someone who looks like you. I was doing there's this, and I forget the name of it now. I wrote it. By the time this airs, I will have done I was honored to be asked to speak at the She Sells Summit. And I'm forgetting the name of this concept, but there's actually a thing in psychology where we are hardwired in our brains to trust information from someone that comes from someone who looks like us.
Yeah.
Period. It comes back to our tribal nature. We're hardwired to do that. And that's what makes this so essential and makes it hard. And that's why it's so hard if you are a person of color trying to educate someone who is not. Just instinctively, you are going to be, through no fault of the other person, they're just instinctively going to take everything you say as slightly suspect, unless they're actively working not to do that, which is hard to do and hard to find, because a lot of people don't know. We don't know these things.
Yeah.
It's tough because, and Nirvana, and both of you, I want to hear your points of view, but I think it's tough challenging people. I remember, and I'm sure you both have stories similar to this, and Nirvana, over your 7 years as an AE, I'd love to hear about it. But, I remember I met at a bar for an SDR manager role. I'm not going to say the company name, but, I met with them.
Could we just call out the fact that this was a bar for
bar, right?
Like, come on, we're better than this, tech.
Yes, there was a bar in downtown Boston, State Street, actually, and I remember it very clearly because I'd been considered before and been passed up, and I'm just like, I'm going to be aggressive about this. And I remember going, and I remember we had a great conversation, and then I was just like shocked. I didn't even know what to say. Where the VP basically was like, yeah, the one thing I'm concerned about is, how are you going to, are you going to have the presence that you need with a lot of our SDRs who are a lot of former athletes, and they're, they're 6'1" and I'm 5'2", and I was I'll be honest, at that time, this was a couple of years ago, I had no idea what to say. I was like, first of all, my friend, you were 3 inches taller than me. How do you do it? And
Nice.
how is this even coming up?
I got asked that in my first SDR interview.
Really?
They asked literally my first ever SDR interview. The senior leader that I was interviewing with, who was not a sales leader, but it was a senior leader at the company, asked me how comfortable I was going to be in an office that was predominantly men. And just asked, are you going to be, and I'm, early 20s. I'm like, I don't care. I want a job. The economy's, and this is good money compared to what I'm making working with autistic kids. Respect to anyone who works with autistic kids. The pay is terrible. The hours are crazy. I was burned out after 8 months.
Yeah.
So I was really excited about this. And looking back, I really wish I challenged, but I didn't know better. And my response was basically my idea of a fun evening is hanging out with a bunch of hockey players. So there's really nothing you can say in here. It's going to shock me. And in hindsight, I hate that answer because I just gave them permission to be sexist around me.
Yeah.
In the moment, I was really proud of myself for having an answer.
Yeah.
But these are things that if you are not a woman, if you're not a person of color, these are the things that other people deal with constantly. And like Sunanda said, we all have these stories. And if we don't have an exact story, I'm very lucky that I've never been in a position where I was at risk of assault or anything like that, or sexual harassment. I've never had any of those experiences, thank God. But I know dozens of women who have.
Yeah.
So it's these things of it's just this weird, infuriating nature of our business. And I just went down a rabbit hole. Y'all are getting me fired up right now. I'm just like,
yeah, it's interesting because I've been working since 2014 when I graduated from college, and I have seen workplace culture change a lot across my years. I think especially in the past year or so, George Floyd's murder being publicized changed everything for workplace culture. Like that really upset so many people that now, like, I mean, RippleMatch's entire business, like we get calls from every single company because they want to improve diversity. Like that's like, there's so much urgency around DE&I in the workplace now. And I think it started like last May, like the May before last May 2020. I think that's when it was, or was it March? I don't remember, but
I've lost track of time. So
I know, like what year is it?
Time
But
has no meaning. It's fine. It's a construct.
but I think like, I mean, the first workplace culture I for sales that I was in was very quote unquote broy. And I was told by a people manager that I'm not allowed to say that word because it's supposed to be like biased. It's a biased word, but it was broy. And like there were people from HubSpot from before HubSpot was cool. Like now HubSpot is like the pinnacle of like a diverse work culture, but it wasn't before that book came out, and that book changed everything. So there were like people like yelling curse insults to each other across the room. It was mostly men, all like Tom Brady wannabes. Like the women were all Kim K wannabes. Like everybody dressed very sexually for work. Like it wasn't like very
Full-on Wolf of
scantily.
Wall Street.
Yeah, it was weird. It wasn't like just the women. I'm not here to slut shame anybody, like, but like the men would like unbutton their shirts to like halfway down their chest. There would be a keg in the office like every single week, no food. Like it was just this crazy, insane culture. And then like
East Coast and West Coast, like East Coast,
yeah,
like everyone goes hyper sexy. West Coast, everyone goes like goes bum slash surfer slash hippie.
yeah, yeah, right.
This is like just the coast difference. Like San Francisco, nobody dresses like that. But what everyone does in San Francisco is I have had repeated conversations with people that no, you cannot wear flip-flops into the office.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
So
it's the opposite
strange.
thing. It's not button up your shirt. It's can you please not wear cargo shorts?
Yeah, wow. I mean,
No, you
like,
cannot wear basketball shorts in the office, please. But
yeah,
the
I mean,
engineers do it. I don't care.
yeah, I mean, oh yeah, in startup culture, I mean, like like they're like wear whatever you want, just like wear closed-toed shoes in the office, like things like that for your protection. Yeah, so
Right.
it's definitely gotten better at, but like it just like the culture just felt very like sexual. Like I don't even know, like it was like in a frat or something, and there would be like
Yeah.
dads with 3 kids like hitting on me as a 22-year-old girl, you know, and I was just kind of like, what is happening here? And I mean,
I have had to, I worked at a startup and one of our advisors who worked for one of our VCs came in and I had to literally tell the women on my team, he is going to ask you out for drinks.
what?
Do not go. And they're like, but why? It's great experience. Like, I know. And if you want to go, I'm not going to hold it against you, but I would not feel, if you were my sister, I would not let you go with him.
Yeah.
And this is not someone who's ever had anything accused of him. It's just because of the sheer fact that this is a man who's somewhere in his 60s with way too much money, who every time he showed up to an event at our company would always go find the youngest, most beautiful women and try and get them to come out and have drinks with him.
Yeah.
It's just, I hope it's just he enjoys the presence of beautiful women, but that is just not a safe environment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I did that regularly and we kept inviting him back.
I know. And then how many women
when I started
exit?
doing it, he stopped coming.
Yeah, like Nirvana, like you held, like going through that, you held, like you just kept going, right? Like you stayed in AE, right? But like, and like, I think that's awesome, but it's also sucks that you had to be in that environment and push through it. And how many women are like, I can't deal with this, right?
Yeah,
like, I'm going to go to, not, just generalizing, I'm going to go to marketing, right? Because, because I want
that's where all the women are and where I'm safe.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to deal with someone hitting on me.
Yeah.
I like this job, or I think I can do good, but like, this isn't worth it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part where I'm like, why?
And you can't say that's why you're leaving.
Yeah.
You can't say that's why. It has to be, I don't like quota.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be something neutral like that. It has to be, I'm not enjoying the work as much. And I mean, you literally have people who, or heaven forbid, I can't afford to be in sales and start a family because when I go on mat leave, I'm going to lose 3/4 of my income because because my income goes to half of my salary, not half of my OTE, half of my salary. So I can't afford to lose 3/4 of my income if 50% of my income is OTE. So I literally have to go to marketing to afford to have a kid.
Yeah.
There's no other department in the world that runs like this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, definitely.
absolutely, and I know, yeah, at least a couple dozen women who've literally said, I'm
Yeah.
going to go do this for 4 years and start a family, and then I'll try and come back if I can.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I don't know.
Okay, so now we're all frustrated.
Yeah, I was about to be like, now I just kind of want to get like meet up with you all in person and just
Yeah.
have a meeting.
I mean, I have seen it get better. And
It
I mean,
is.
like, maybe it's because I'm working in SaaS now and it's like more modern technology, younger people who tend to be more liberal. But like, since I transitioned into SaaS, it has been better. But like, anecdote, Sunanda, related to what you were saying earlier about the SDRs that choose a different path. In my pod at my last company, I had 2 women working as SDRs with me, and they both were like, we don't know if we want to be in sales because you get sexually harassed in sales. And it was just like a fact that they knew from things that they saw at their other companies. Like, one woman said that at her last company, she showed up to work, and like the men who were sitting in the area asked her if she was going to bake. Like, even something like that is sexual harassment.
As someone who bakes for the office regularly, bring things in, fuck whoever said that.
Yeah.
That's so terrible.
Right.
And just for that, like, now I'm not going to see, now I don't want to bring things in because I don't want to reinforce that stereotype. And that means I'm going to end up baking and eating it here, which is not good.
I also,
not good for anybody.
I think going back to, like, it's like, Ashleigh, you mentioned this was, I've seen people, I think there's like a responsibility on leadership. And I think when you're a white male and you've never experienced it, you're like, oh, just brush it off. But like, I've seen reps get on calls and like the prospect, which we can't control, will like start hitting on them like during a negotiation call. And it's like, and they're so uncomfortable and they get off, and like, I've literally seen this play out where, they brought it up. They're like, yeah, I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do. Like, and they're like, well, did you try this negotiating tip? I'm like, whoa, this is not about, this is
not a strategy.
Yeah.
This is about the fact that your rep just got sexually harassed on a call. And like, I don't know, like, I don't know what the protocol is there, but like, that should be the conversation you're having.
Yeah.
Right?
Companies should,
right?
Society as a whole should not have to do the math on, like, sales reps are constantly, and I've had this situation. I'm not even terribly overt, but I have had a few points where it's like, okay, I'm literally calculating how much my commission is going to be. And am I ready to walk away from that because this guy is an asshole? Again, no other department has to deal with this. And honestly, and I think this happens if you are a member of any minority group. I know members of the LGBTQ plus community who have literally done the math on, do I want to walk away from a commission because this person is a bigot? I know people of color who've had to walk away and go from, do I want to walk away from this deal because this person is a racist? And not just for them, but for the company.
Yeah.
But sales reps are having these conversations on their own. And then there's this pressure of, oh, well, I have to deal with it because I don't want to screw the company, because I don't want to take this deal away from the company. And if you're in sales leadership and you're not actively asking your people if this is happening, it is happening out of your control, and you are either getting clients you don't want or you are losing money. Guarantee it.
I'm curious, Nirvana, with RippleMatch. I remember when you joined RippleMatch and I checked it out online just because I was so intrigued, and like, what, as far as I don't know much about the model, but like, I feel like you all are definitely doing something valuable. Are you seeing, because you're probably speaking to people very, companies that are trying to get people young in their career, do you also speak to the candidate side, and like, how does that work? Like, what are you seeing? I'm just super curious about that.
Yeah, great question. Well, so I guess like with RippleMatch itself, just to speak to their work culture, they're headquartered in New York. So I think that does help with diversity, and also they're a remote first company. So I'm working on the most diverse sales team I've ever worked on before, and it's wonderful. Like, it's like mostly women. I work with 2 Black men, 1 gay man. Like, it's just like so wonderful to see that breakdown in a sales team, although it's not like super collaborative because like we're all like kind of siloed, being remote and like kind of working on our own book of business, and the sales team is a little bit older. So it just feels like like a lot safer and more comfortable than other companies I've worked for. And in terms of like the candidates, so RippleMatch is a diversity recruitment tool, but it specializes at the entry level. So there's a whole side of our business that's dedicated to finding college students. And I think it's really interesting. I work with the employers that are trying to attract, hire and retain those college students. And it's interesting to see like the shift that's happening. Gen Z is doing, first of all, really amazing things for STEM.
Yeah.
So there's more women and minorities in STEM and Gen Z. And of course, like it just feels like for a lot of these companies, they're trying to have an emerging talent strategy because they're struggling so hard at the mid and higher level to have diversity. And they're like, we kind of need to start from scratch. So they're trying to like recruit a lot of Gen Z candidates and make that population really diverse. And I think like the challenge from there on is like how they promote these candidates, how they promote these employees. To like, is it going to be the white men that rise up, or is it going to be like a variety of people from different backgrounds? Just because like it's kind of like they're planting seeds for the future with
Yeah.
Gen Z candidates, and that's the strategy that I'm seeing a lot of companies take with like emerging talent.
Yeah, that's super cool. I remember I spoke to Lori Richardson a couple of years ago when I worked at Wistia, and she was doing stuff with us. And one of the things we talked about was pipeline from college, right? Like most people come out of college and they're like, unless they had someone in their life or like they were familiar with the sales motion, most women particularly are like, I'm not going into sales. I did the same thing. I didn't start in sales and I was like, I'm not going into sales. That's like
Nirvana. I also had a dad in sales.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, never. I don't wanna.
That's actually how I felt before I interviewed for the account executive position, not knowing it was a sales job, but similar.
It's super interesting how that plays out. And
yeah,
I think I know you had a non-traditional like sort of route to sales, and so did I. And like for me, my dad wasn't in sales. I didn't have anyone in my sphere that was in sales, like I knew of. And the first thing I thought of was like, no, like when I got offered a sales job, and I interviewed for a marketing job, ironically, and got offered a sales job, and I was like, no.
A bunch of people, that's how a lot of people got in. I know a ton of women who started off interviewing for a marketing role or a secretarial role or an admin role. And they're like, hey, you should do sales.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that was my first VP. I just was lucky enough to have a VP who was ahead of the curve he was a man. He was, he was half Indian, but he was half white, but like, he did not care. He didn't care about college. He didn't care if he went to college. He was like, I look for talent. That's all I look for. But like, that's not true of most leaders. And he invested in me, but like, I think was unique, like, 8-9 years ago, right? So I'm seeing more of a shift, but there's still like, I want to see, that accelerate continually. So I'm glad that, folks like
there's
in there.
Yeah, there's more work to be done, but I think when I get frustrated, I just think about how much it's changed and how much better it's gotten in just like the 7 years I've been working in sales, so like, who knows what it'll be like 7 years from now.
All right. And on that note, now that we've ended on like, hey, who knows where it's going to be? Things are getting better because they are.
Yes.
We're going to shift up. We're going to end this episode. This has been so much fun. Getting this, like, getting our rage out slightly and venting, but still being hopeful. And I want to speak to, like, there are so many allies. Like, I know we've been on like leadership sucks at this like that. There are so many allies who are really trying and are making a huge impact. So you know who you are, and we love you. But we're going to wrap this episode the way we always do with our lightning round. So these are a series of rapid fire questions designed just to be fun. Don't stress about anything too much, but just starting off really simply with, I bet you've got a good one. Tell us about your morning routine.
Ooh, morning routine. So, well, I mean, like, the usual brushing your teeth, washing your face, right? But like, I think in terms of my morning routine, something that is different is that I try not to look at my phone for the first hour of every day. And so I will like, take care of my hygiene. I make a smoothie every single morning, blueberry banana peanut butter smoothie. I have coffee, spend some time with my fiance. And sometimes I do yoga in the morning for my training, but like besides that, it's pretty standard. I just get to my computer.
Pick one person who's had a significant impact on your career.
Okay, that's a great question. There's lots of people that I could credit. I think who I'm going to credit right now is Ms. Connie Johnson from Owner IQ, who they got bought by Inmar. So I think they're Inmar Technologies now, but she was the first woman sales, I guess, leader that I really gained a lot from. I guess she was like a mentor to me. I worked for her directly for probably like a year or two. And what I liked about Connie was that she would tell me exactly the way that she liked to do things, which helped me learn things. So instead of telling me like, hey, you should do this, you should do that, she's like, here's how I would say it, and here's my style. And I think that was like a really great way for me to learn quickly.
Awesome. All right. What's your pump up song?
Ooh, pump up song. Good question. Well, I love anything by Sean Paul. So maybe Get Busy by Sean Paul.
Love
I
it.
love that. What's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier?
Good question. I think, I think advocating for yourself is something that I wished I learned earlier. I think that when I was early in my career, I didn't realize that I had a voice. I felt like I was among all of these real adults, and here I was in disguise, a child, who just graduated, not understanding that I could say when I thought something was inappropriate, or if I wanted something for my career, that I could just ask for it.
I love that. All right. What book has had the biggest impact on your sales career?
Good question. Well, so can I name two here?
Fine.
Okay, fine. So first, Radical Candor. I just love that book. I think it's like a good book for just humans in terms of balancing how kind you are with how direct you are and giving feedback. And I think that's something that is like now an inherent skill that I really try to use with everyone. And then the other one was one that our last CRO, Carl Olivieri, had us all read, Selling Above the Line and Below the Line, which is a book that helps you understand how to sell to like VP levels and above versus folks that are like more of the technical users of a product. And I think that was just like a big paradigm shift for me in my sales career.
It's awesome. I'm gonna have to get that book name for you afterwards, because I need to reconnect with Carl, but I'm glad that he's what's one way someone could have been a better ally to you?
Ooh, good question. I think in one of my sales jobs, I worked on a team that was like all middle-aged white men who were dads. And then it was like me, the youngest one, the only woman and the only woman of color. And I think that like there were a lot of times when they would talk about like middle-aged dad things that didn't feel like I didn't feel like I belonged. And it kind of felt like I was like an office plant is what I've used it described as in on LinkedIn. And I think that like having somebody like loop me into the conversation and create a more like inclusive team, even though I was the outlier, would have been nice.
That's so true. I like that. I haven't heard that before. I'm gonna use that from now on.
It's like you don't exist. You're not here.
You're there. You exist, but you're not
I'm like
interacted with. You're something to be looked at, which is
I'm like, yeah. Like
that's
this is an open office. I can hear you.
Yeah.
all right. What's one way that you're working to be a better ally for others?
Ooh, I love this question. Well, I think that one way I'm looking to be a better ally for others is I think like inviting people into the conversation. So like trying not to let other people be plants on the wall or like, wallflowers. And when I see somebody who's quiet, maybe because they're introverted or they don't like feel like they belong yet, just like inviting them to share their opinion. I think that alone can mean a lot when it's like, hey, well, Sunanda, what do you think about that?
And last question, what's your guilty pleasure after a long day?
Ooh, okay. After a long day, guilty pleasure. I think like what's kind of a guilty pleasure is ordering Uber Eats. Like I feel bad because I shouldn't be spending money on food when I have groceries in the fridge, and that makes me feel guilty. But also sometimes I'm like, I can't cook right now, so that's why it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
If you're gonna order Uber Eats, what sort of food are you ordering?
Oh, good question. I really love I mean, I try to dodge like the pizza and stuff like that, even though that's often what I'm craving. I really love like mapo tofu, from like the Chinese restaurant, like something like kind of healthy because it's like,
Yeah, I
vegetarian,
love
but
when we convince ourselves that Chinese food is healthy.
yeah,
It's like, not
yeah, it's
necessarily, but
vegetables.
it's better than pizza.
Better
Yeah,
than
it's got
pizza.
ginger.
I love
That's
the
awesome.
veggies. We'll just ignore the
Yeah.
noodles. Awesome.
I,
Nirvana, this has been so lovely again to speak with you, and thank you for sharing your experience, and you're just impressive in every way. This has been delightful. How can people get in touch with you? How can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. My name is Nirvana, spelled Nirvanna, and there aren't very many of us, and I think I'm the most popular one. So, like, just find me on LinkedIn. I'm not big on Twitter or anything, so
Yeah,
happy to connect with whomever.
and we'll put a link in the show notes. So click in there, make sure you connect and follow her. And as always, if you enjoy this episode, please do like, share. It really helps if you subscribe in your podcast catcher of choice. And if you really want to help, please make sure to leave a review. That really helps increase our search visibility for people who are trying to find more sales podcasts to connect with. And as always, you can find us on social, on LinkedIn at Other Side of Sales, on Twitter at OSOS_pod, on Instagram at Other Side Sales. And just to let us know, connect if there's more people you think we should be speaking with, or if there's topics you want us talking about. We want to hear all of it, good, bad, and ugly. Thank you so much for listening, Nirvana. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll talk to you next time for another episode of The Other Side of Sales.